Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Chrysalis. This is your host, Kristen Matting. Today, I am joined once again by the incomparable Jen Carew. If you remember, she was on the podcast a few episodes ago. We talked about our awakening experiences together, and she shared about her business, her spiritual business, which is really taking off. And yeah, she's just doing great things. So I was so thrilled when she agreed to come back, and we threw out a couple different ideas about what we would discuss. I believe she came up with the idea for forgiveness, and that's where we landed. And I really, really enjoyed our conversation today. I hope you do as well. And yeah, if you want to follow Jen and find her content, she's at jencarew.com. That's JenCarew.com. She's also on Instagram and on LinkedIn. And yeah, she's great. So make sure you check her out. And a big thanks to her for coming on once again and yeah, sharing her perspective on the world, this time specifically on forgiveness. So without further ado, here is our conversation. Hi, Jen. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Kristen. I'm so glad are doing this again. I had such a good time last time.
I know, me too. It felt like a really warm, heart-centered conversation, and
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to have another one with you. And before we get started, could you catch us up on what's been happening in your world and with your business?
So yeah, since I think the last time we talked was October, and since then I have written 10 blog posts. So the blog is really the story of my awakening experience, and so there's 10 blog posts up, and I also launched my first course, and so I'm going to be offering a series of 7 courses, and the course series is called On the Path, Spiritual Principles for Awakened Living. And so I believe there are 7 universal spiritual principles that when we learn to embody, help us experience a life of peace and joy and fulfillment. So the first principle is identity. And we've talked about this before, and it's really about understanding the truth of who we are, that we are spirit first. And so once we make that shift, it unlocks a new level of awareness in our lives. And so it's really foundational to all of the other principles. I think when we last talked, I was going to be launching the perception principle. And I've written half of that course. And then I kind of took a step back, and I'm like, well, in order to see the world through a new light, you have to start to primarily identify with yourself as spirit first, and not the human experience first, because there's 2 parts of who we are. So anyways, identity is about rediscovering the truth of who we are, and that launched in December.
Wonderful. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's been going well, and I've seen
Yeah.
your content pop up on LinkedIn and Instagram, and yeah, it's always fun to see what you have to say. And
Thanks.
though I was also very sad to see the news about your dog, and I know
Yeah.
you were dealing with that earlier this year.
Yeah, I think, that was a really difficult time for me and my husband. We lost our dog of 16 and a half years, and she was such an integral part of our daily lives. And so going through that loss really through a different lens and through a different time in my life, a time after I'd done so much healing, um, I didn't shy away from just really like letting myself feel all of the pain and the grieving of that loss. And so that's been, again, processing that in layers and letting the pain come up as it does in waves, and oftentimes when you're least expecting it. And every little thing that, there's all sorts of things that remind you of somebody you've lost, right? And
Yeah.
so that's been challenging. And so I'm also working on an ebook about grief and healing and loss, which is basically what I used to heal myself and I'll probably be sharing that in the coming months as well. So thank you. I appreciate that. And it was a very, very difficult time for us.
I can imagine. I'm truly sorry. Our fur babies are members of the family,
Yeah,
and that's a big
she
deal. And
was.
I am glad that you can channel your grief and your process for grieving and moving through that experience into something that hopefully will be useful for other people as well.
Yeah.
That's probably the best thing you can ask for in a situation like that.
Yeah. It's like how can I use this experience, and how can this experience like help me bring more light into the world, or help somebody else remember that, grieving is a part of loving.
Yeah.
And when we lose someone that we love, um, it is natural and normal, no matter how peaceful we are, to experience the all of the human emotions that come with loss. And it's important that we do, instead of prolonging that grief. There really is a way, by experiencing it, to release it.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you can come on and chat about grief sometime,
Yeah,
and share
love
some of the
to.
lessons from your book. Great.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So today we're talking about forgiveness, and we're going to start with just a very general sort of defining of what forgiveness is, and
Okay.
um, talk about the importance that you feel forgiveness plays in a human life, on a spiritual path, or however you want to look at it. And then we'll dive into each of our own processes for forgiveness. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so I know this is like an impossible question, but how do you think of forgiveness? How do you define forgiveness?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big one, and I think that's why it's really cool that we're having like just a whole discussion on it, because I think it has so many layers to it. There's sort of the sort of traditional way that most people think of forgiveness, which is sort of like letting things go, right? Like, and that's sort of when we're thinking about forgiveness through the lens of our day-to-day lives, maybe even our egoic selves. That's the sort of way I used to think about it. And as I've been on this journey to sort of see the world through a different lens, through the lens of love instead of a lens of my separated self or my egoic self, the way I see it has changed too. And I think that's it's sort of like a deepening of the understanding of it. I think forgiveness gets us on the path to freedom. And when we are truly able to forgive, we are free. We set ourselves free to see people for who they really are, and even to see ourselves for who we really are. And so when I think of forgiveness, I think of it as seeing the innocence in every person. And that is really comes from a place of like deeply internalizing the understanding and the deep knowing that we are all children of God, or children of the universe, or we are all created from the same universal womb, so to speak. So this understanding of the oneness of all of us, knowing that we are all really love, having a human experience. It's being able to just remember that the truth of who everyone is their spirit, is their spiritual self, and that everyone is a child of God. So it's a different lens through which to see the world.
That's really beautiful. You gave me goosebumps so many times. I Yeah, and I see it so similarly. I probably give it slightly different words, but very, very much the same. I tend to think of it as, or I tend to think of it as having this layer of um, breaking from past trauma, ending the cycle of trauma,
Mm.
from which we still operate, sometimes subconsciously, sometimes
Yes.
consciously. But when
Right.
we are continually affected internally by something that took place in our past, it is hard to be free of it. And when we are
Mm.
not free of it and we are encumbered by it, affected by it, and operating from a place of being affected by it,
Yeah.
we are not living our most free selves, our most free lives, and our most loving lives. Because the emotional energy that takes up space in our body, um,
Mm.
it, it's preventing more love from coming into our body to be felt and experienced. I'm not saying negative emotions are bad.
Right.
But for me, it's a question of, do I want more love experience in my human being,
Right.
or do I want more resentment, difficult to feel emotions, guilt,
Right.
um yeah, resentment, anger, shame, all of the big toughies. So
Yeah.
in those are very uncomfortable emotions for me, and they're very motivating for me to figure out how to be free of them. And that has motivated me a lot in the past. um and it and I hate to say that, almost because it does paint this picture of them being bad, and I don't want to be
Mm.
in resistance to those difficult feelings. They're part of the human experience. But as much as I can be unaffected by a situation that's happened in the past, and allow more love to come into my being, the healthier I will be. And as you said, since we're all connected and we're all part of, well, you didn't say energy soup, but I'll say the energy soup.
Yeah. All
um,
the same thing, just different ways to say it, right? You always talk
well,
about.
you
Yeah.
called it a
Yeah.
womb, which was much more eloquent and poetic. I'll call it a chicken noodle soup. Um, anyway, um, yeah, when we are free of being affected by those situations, then and we are contributing to the betterment of all of society, of to the energetic soup. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think what you touched on too, just about the past and trauma, and we all have trauma and wounds from our past, and oftentimes in life, as you know, we avoid feeling and remembering those things. We try to push them down. We try to numb out so we don't have to think of them. There's all sorts of ways that we try to manage out the difficult pasts, and try to forget them instead of moving through that pain and moving through that trauma. And I think that's part of the healing. And when you're able to move through that, then you're able to um, finally lay it down, right? And finally stop bringing the past experiences into the present, because we're in the past, likely, if we have not gone on a deeper spiritual journey, we're operating from this place that is very much concerned with thinking about everything that happened to us before, or worrying about what's going to happen in the future. We're not operating from the present moment. And so as we move into a spiritual journey, we learn how to operate more in the present. It doesn't mean past thoughts don't come into our awareness. They do. But then how do we, number one, honor them, and then learn to see, like, if this is causing me pain, how do I release this pain, rather than suppressing it? And then it's just going to come up again and again and again until we finally look at it and understand sort of root cause, and start to heal those traumas, as you know. We've talked about this in the past.
Yeah, completely. Feeling our feelings, and it I can say that so easily, and I know it's very challenging,
Yeah.
and it's very uncomfortable to feel all of the feelings. But what we do resist persists
Mm.
and continues to knock on the door. And the good thing about feeling the feelings is that you get information. All of that emotional energy comes, it's like a packet of information.
Right.
And if you can follow the breadcrumbs of the emotion to a source, or to new insight, to new understanding, um, it helps you let go of it.
Yeah.
So it it's not just about processing the emotion by attending to it. That is a huge part of it, and that is a huge part of my process that I'll discuss later. But
Yeah.
but also receiving the insight that your body is trying to share with you. And the more we refuse to feel those feelings in full,
Yeah.
we're not receiving the message that they're trying to share. So
Mm,
yeah, I
so
think
true.
huge component of forgiveness.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what do you think, why do you think forgiveness is important as a human being? And I know we touched on this a little bit, but can you dive into that a bit more?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it really is our way to freedom. And when I say freedom, I mean um, living a life that is unencumbered by fear,
Mhm.
and living from the place of that is our natural state, living from the place that is love, that is peaceful, that is joy, and that is our spirit, and that is the eternal part of us, of each of us, that when we are able to operate our lives from spirit rather than our sort of separate self or our egoic self, then we are able to see the world in a totally new light. And so that's where the freedom to experience joy and peace and fulfillment comes from. So forgiveness is key to all of it, because it's not just letting go of the past, it's also extending your perception in the present moment to see beyond what your physical senses are telling you, right? Your physical senses are telling you that person's looking at me with a mean face, that person has a weird tone, I'm hearing a weird tone, they're judging me. So our physical senses are giving us this one set of information that our brains latch onto, and that our ego latches onto, and makes some sort of judgment. And so when we are able to recognize that happening in the moment and forgive them for the way that they're acting in the moment, and
Mhm.
see them and know, because we know, our spirit knows that who they are is their spirit,
Mhm.
and because that's who we are, and we are all the same. So who they are is their spirit. So when we can say, I see all of this happening, right? Like you're not denying it. Like I see all of this is happening with my five senses here. they're being, mean, if you had
Mhm.
to put a label on it. And my spirit knows that they're just making a mistake right now. This is not the truth of who they are. And so I'm going to extend my perception. I'm going to put on a different lens, and I'm going to see them through the lens of forgiveness, through the lens of love, and, and into the truth of who they are. It's a totally different way to experience somebody in the moment too. So, and that is what freedom is. It doesn't mean we let ourselves be abused. It doesn't mean that we don't hold others accountable for treating us poorly, but it does mean that we don't have to get hooked into every single moment where somebody's being unkind, and we don't have to get reactive to that. And if we are in a different place, likely what happens is it shifts them into a different place too. And I've experienced this personally, in many times through practicing this. And it does, again, it is to what we talked about earlier. When we're having an unloving thought, when we're having an emotion that is based in fear, that is our cue to say we're thinking through the lens of our egoic nature, of our separate self. We're not thinking through the lens of love right now. So how can we shift into the lens of love and extend our perception to see them for who they really are?
Yeah. I want to say so many things as you're talking.
That was a
Um,
long answer.
no, it wasn't. I think it was perfect. And the last thing that came into my mind was meditation can really help with that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely
being able to
essential.
catch yourself in those moments of I'm having this kind of thought, being in that witness
Yeah.
perspective of observing yourself as you're experiencing a thought that is not you, that is of the human body, of
Right.
the DNA and the physical part of you that is encasing your soul in order to have a human experience. So, we can
Right.
separate ourselves out into sort of these different components of who we are. And we have the body, we have the spirit, the soul, the higher self,
Right.
however you want to define it, or, whatever labels you want to give it. Um, but when we can observe the human body reacting, that separation of realizing that's not who I am, it also opens up the door for self-forgiveness and
Yes.
detachment, which is really, really important when we're trying to move into these like bigger, broader perspectives,
Yeah.
and not be so fused with our human experience all the time.
Yes. All the time, and completely identifying. And that's the thing. It's the shift from like primarily identifying with um, the body and seeing the world through our five senses and our conditioned mind, right? All of the like the physical wiring of our brains, of our gray matter that has neural pathways that have been conditioned by, continuing repetitive behaviors over the course of our lives. All of that conditioning, our mind wants to find the path of least resistance, right? So it's going to go to whatever it's done in the past. So being able to fully be present in the moment doesn't just mean that I'm not bringing the past into the present and I'm not thinking about the future. It also means I have the ability to be aware of the thoughts and the feelings that are happening and make a different choice in the moment if that choice is not loving. And that's what, and so forgiveness is like so much more than just like letting it go. It is like seeing somebody through the lens of love in every given moment.
Yes. Yes, that takes me back to another thought I had, which is see, somebody else said this, and it's not exactly the right word, but it's seeing somebody for their potential. And it's not the right word because we are inherently love, or a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah.
So you don't have to attain it. It's not a potential you're trying to reach. It's something you inherently
Right.
are. But to see somebody not for who they're presenting in front of you in this exact moment, and so we're getting into non-judgment a bit here, right? And it doesn't have to be even something they're doing, just some version of themselves that they're presenting in the moment. Perhaps the way they look, the way they dress, the way they talk, all of these things that our human mind wants to judge and categorize and put into buckets so we can understand our environment and make sense of the world. But we know better that person is love in a human
Yeah.
costume.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And not that the human costume is bad. It is a part of the whole of who we are. Right. It's as important. Like it's such a gift, and it's something we are here. We should be grateful for. Not should isn't the right word, but that to be grateful for our body is to understand that it is our learning device. It is here to help us um, help us learn as long as we're here in this, current form. And it's the way that we get to experience other humans, right? And that's the greatest gift, is the love that we get to share with one another. And more than just, a romantic love, but the love of, the love with camaraderie and with, just the love of humanity, the love of animals, the love of nature, and being able to feel that is the greatest gift of our human existence. And so we just have to remember that also what comes with our human existence is this, sort of reptilian brain that's been, wired to survive, and it's not able to access these higher levels of and of love that our spirit is. And so that we got to get them to work together. Instead, they don't have to be separate. It's about bringing them both together and to have the best life experience that we can.
Totally. And I like to play with the belief or idea that we chose to come into this world. Our spirit, our soul chose to come in and have a human experience, and that we even had some sort of design of what that might look like, and maybe for a
Mm,
purpose, or maybe just for the purpose of the experience, just to see what it's
mm,
like. Um,
mm,
and so I love that idea that I chose. I'm going to be, Kristen Matting in this lifetime. Well, Kristen Loudy, I was originally, and in this lifetime, and I'm going to experience a life that looks like A, B, C, D.
yeah,
And because I've never had that kind of experience before, and also that we choose to temporarily forget who we are. Though, as you and I know,
mm,
we can remember, we can
yeah,
re-access that memory, that somatic feeling of being connected to all. But that feeling that in feeling that separation, in choosing to feel that separation and have a human experience, we also have the bliss moments of reconnecting that you don't
yeah,
have if you don't separate. So
mm,
it is
mm,
inviting duality into our experience
wonderful.
intentionally, so
Yeah,
that we can have that really a wonderful moment of
mm,
reconnection, which you don't.
mhm,
I don't know if you have that in any other way than a physical experience. I'm not. I don't know
mm.
what else is out there, but yeah.
Yeah, I just got goosebumps thinking of that because you're right. And it is that moment of unification of spirit and body that we are able to fully feel what bliss is, right? And have an experience of it
Mhm.
through our body. So that's beautiful. And I know it's sort of kind of not, I mean, this is all related to forgiveness, because again, forgiveness, it gets us on this path to freedom. And that's why I think it's so central. It's one of the most important of all the universal spiritual principles in my mind, because of that reason, because it is the way that we are able to transcend the sort of the fear-based thinking that we're conditioned um, to operate through as people of this world, in the current state of the world.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. Um, I haven't spent a ton of time seeking forgiveness. It's not. I don't know if I want to say it exactly like that. I have, but I don't know if you were, and you don't have to fill in the blanks if you don't feel like it, but I don't know if you were raised with any sort of Christian background. I was, and there's a lot of importance put on forgiveness
Mm.
um, in the teachings. And I'm wondering if you feel, I can only speak about the Christian religion because I have studied it. So I'm sure there's
Yeah.
other religions also that entertain ideas of forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness. There's also, evidence of an eye for an eye in the Bible. So there's maybe some
Mm.
contradictory things in there as well. Um, but my understanding of forgiveness is that it's just very important to forgive. And that's like a very rudimentary description, I'm sure, of what the religion preaches. And I'm not trying to get into religion here. I
Yeah.
guess a lot of us have conditioning. This is my point. A lot of us have conditioning, especially if we're raised in a Christian faith. We have
Right.
conditioning that forgiveness is very, very important.
Yeah.
And so we often um, have self-judgment if we're not able to get to a place of forgiveness.
Mm. Mm.
And we
Yeah.
also think it should be easy for some
Mm.
reason. The Bible says we should just, or my mom said, or my dad said, we should just forgive. Whatever that conditioning, wherever it came from, is sort of irrelevant. Um, and so I'm wondering, is there space also to live a spiritual life if you are not in a state of forgiveness for all things? Can,
Yeah.
can you still live a good life, whatever that
Mm.
means, you know?
That's a really tough question to answer because, anytime that we are not able to forgive, we're only blocking our own peace, right? Or like, so forgiveness is the sort of or the absence of forgiveness is sort of as a blocker to our awareness of the presence of peace. So as we're holding on to things that we're not willing to see differently, to see in a different light, Because the truth is, one thing happens and the same 10 people can look at it and they will all have a different perception of what happened, right? And it goes through the lens of their conditioned brain, and it spits out an answer based on their conditioning. And so I think, to the extent that we are unable to forgive ourselves and others for things in the past, the more of that there is that we're carrying around with us, the less of peace we're going to be able to experience. And I think it happens in layers. I don't think we're like, I mean, I'm sure it has happened to someone where they were able to completely forgive everything in one moment of enlightenment. That hasn't been my experience. It is come in layers, and it comes over a period of time where you're, again, in your living your life, and a thought comes up or an emotion comes up that's unloving or fearful, and you look at it, and then you can either try to forget about it, or you try to dig deeper and see what's underneath it. So I think it's very challenging. And then so there's the past, and there's the past forgiveness, and then there's in the moment, especially if you're in a situation with maybe someone that you have a difficult history with, right? And so you're bringing all of that past history into that present moment with this person, and you're not seeing them for who they are right now. Like, you're only seeing them from the space of all of the things that they've done to you in the past, all the ways that they judged you, all the ways you judged them. And so if you are bringing that into any current moment with you, then you are not able to see them for who they really are, because the truth is, people can grow and they can change. And oftentimes, it's our lack of willingness to forgive that keeps us in this box, in this relationship box with this person that we never break out of, because we're not willing to see them differently.
I agree. And what if somebody is bringing the same energy,
right,
and they haven't changed?
It's tough. I mean, I have some relationships that I'm still working on in my life where I have a deep history. It's a history that sort of is very foundational to my life, and so in these moments, anytime I have moments with them, I have to be very, very conscious of what I'm thinking and what in the moment, and try to let things go, or try to remember that they are spirit. And I think it does happen in layers. And for me, came up recently with the death of my dog, and I realized that I had some healing to do, because I had some guilt come up around the way I mothered my dog, or in the way that I had to put my dog down. And it gave me all of this mom guilt, for lack of a better reason. And the truth is, I still have some forgiveness with my mother to process. And so that was a gift that I received in the healing process with losing my dog of 16 years, was recognizing that there's still more healing for me to do with my mother, because I thought I had healed. And but when it comes up again, then I know that I need to do some more work. So
yeah.
That's
interesting. And it's a kind of a gift, not kind of a gift, it's a large gift to realize that you're at a place of wanting to forgive. And I think not everybody with every situation is there, right? Not everyone is ready to forgive, even if they want to forgive. And what blocks us sometimes is unprocessed emotions that need to be worked through before you can get to the forgiveness part. So, kind of going back to like the conditioning of like, I should forgive. It's the right thing to forgive. I want to forgive because I've been told I'll be a good person if I forgive. And yet I'm harboring all of these really dense emotions that are making it really impossible to forgive. And so like a block to forgiveness. And so to that person, I would make sure they understand that they're not a bad person in my eyes spiritually.
Right.
I don't have judgment for that person. I still have areas where
Yes.
I am struggling to forgive and work through.
Yep.
And if I'm and I even have real compassion for people who don't want to forgive. Like
Mm.
they are too angry. They have been too
Yeah.
wrong, and they don't want to forgive. And I think that might be a permanent place, or it could be a temporary place. And with enough time, they might move into a space where they want to forgive. Um, and perhaps they don't believe that they can,
Yeah.
it could be a
Absolutely.
limiting belief. But I believe that you can be a good person who finds it difficult to forgive, and a spiritual person. And it really comes down to, what do you want, and
Mm.
what are you, and because we all have this human experience, we have gifted ourselves, and we get to choose what we do with it. And so we
Mm.
can choose to work toward forgiveness and be you know, and that can be a very good person who's choosing that goal. And it can be a very good person who's also saying, I'm too hurt, and I'm going to forgive myself for not being able to forgive somebody else.
Yeah.
I think that's very powerful too.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to what you just said. And I think it's like at our core, we are all good people. I don't think there's any, because we're all spirit and we're all pure love. So it's not really even about like being good or bad. It's just like to what degree do you want to experience peace in your life? And then it doesn't mean that you're ready to let things go or forgive in the moment, but it's going to keep coming up for you, right? In all sorts of myriad ways, maybe in a lot of ways you're not even really conscious of,
Yep.
until you forgive. And so, to your point, like some people are like, "Well, I've forgiven them," and they just say they have, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
um, and it's not from a place of that deep place inside of us where we've actually we see this in a new light. We see this event in a new light. We see this person in a new light. It's from a place of really self-righteousness, or showing the world how forgiving we are,
Mhm.
right? Instead of like actually deeply forgiving. And there are some, not to say that there are not some wounds and traumas that are so hard that
Mhm.
it feels like impossible, number one, that to be willing to
Mhm.
forgive, to have any idea of like how I could absolutely actually forgive this person who did some sort of horrible, unspeakable act.
Yeah.
Um, and that's when it's time to surrender and know that we're not here alone, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of my process too, is like I am not able to see this in a new light
Mhm.
with the way it, like and so I give it to spirit,
Mm.
and I ask spirit to help me see this in a new light. Like I am willing, but I am not able. And we are not here. We don't have to do this alone. And that's the thing. I think most people, if they don't have a relationship with their creator,
Mhm.
with whatever they call that, source, God, universe, whatever the name is, that's the missing piece, where we feel like we're alone. And that's why we are unable to heal these wounds
Mm.
that can be, that are, so painful and traumatic and devastating in our lives. And we never get over it because we don't ask for help. We got to give it, you know, give it I give it to spirit, and I say, please just help me see this in a new light. I'm not
Mm.
able to do this on my own.
Yeah. That and that's powerful. And I'm not very good at doing that. And that's based on some of my own like core wounding of not wanting to ask for help with my emotional work, and
Yeah.
so you've inspired me to feel worthy of asking for help with my emotional challenges,
Mm.
and not shouldering the whole burden on my
Yes.
own, which I've I've tended to do as an adult, not wanting, really not wanting to ask for support with my emotional baggage. Um, I wanted to
Sure.
say something else. Let me think what it was, if I can conjure it back up, or else we'll just move on. Okay, I don't know. So I'll just take a cue
But
from, oh, I do
I'm gonna,
remember. Take a cue from my brain, and it's about the brain. So when when I have been able to forgive and I'm on the other side of a situation and I feel mostly unaffected by it emotionally anymore. I'm not very triggered by it.
yeah.
And for me, what that feels like is really a repatterning of the brain.
Mm,
It feels like changes have been made on a cellular level.
mm,
And when I approach a person or a situation or a relationship, I I I cannot be triggered in the same ways that I was previously. And there is
yeah.
some conscious effort that I have to um, apply sometimes to not fall into like old mental patterns of the neural pathways that got carved so deep because I thought the same thought so
Yeah.
many times. But it's so much easier. It's like the forgiveness and the processing of that experience, those experiences have been like laid down with a new blanket of snow, and the grooves are
Mm,
just not as deep. I'm stealing that from some video I saw on TikTok.
beautiful.
I'm sorry, I have no idea who the creator was, but the way he described it, he was talking about
Yes.
psychedelic experiences and that it lays down a new layer of fresh snow. And I was like, yes, that's,
Mm,
but in this way, it's the same thing. Processing all of that emotional baggage lays down a fresh layer of snow over the deep tracks that have been carved, and you can still see the grooves, but you can kind of like glide right over them. It's so much easier to create those new patterns of thought. What's your experience after you've gotten to a place of forgiveness?
yeah, it's amazing that, one relationship that that was sort of deeply troubled for a long time in my life that I've been able to heal. And now when I am with this person, and I don't necessarily want to bring them into the conversation just for personal reasons,
Sure.
so I'll just speak about them in the abstract. But I, you know, it's it is really like the veil has been lifted for this sort of like dark veil that I had in between them and I has been lifted, and I just see them for who they are, and it's really like all of it is gone, like it just is gone, and all of the the stories I told myself about the person, all of the ways that I would guard myself in their presence. There's just, it's a relaxing into this space of the present moment, and there's no walls up. And so I love the idea of the freshly fallen snow, and I do think though the more that we're able to heal relationships in this way and truly see somebody in a new light and truly see them for who they really are, that is a new neural pathway that we can strengthen, and that we can that can help us with other areas of our lives, forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. So the brain knows what this feels like and what this is, and the reward and the payoff for it is there. So I think that in and of itself is powerful. Um, but yeah, the sort of some of the biggest transformations in healing around even forgiving myself has come as a result of just saying like I don't know how to think about this, spirit, like help me see this in another way. Um and then when I get the message, it's like, oh, I can't believe I haven't thought of it that way ever, and it's so, yeah, it's just because there's things that we just don't know. We just don't know. And we can't know everything. But God, universe does, and we can access that. And that's why cultivating that relationship through spiritual practice, and creating a habit of connecting to spirit, and meditate through meditation, is life changing.
Yeah. So let's jump into, if we can create any sort of like guide or step-by-step process. And I know, as we talked about, like it doesn't usually happen overnight, so maybe it's not a one session type of situation, and everybody's process will probably be different, right? I know you and I have different processes, so I imagine
Right.
everybody will have their own way of reaching that spot of rewiring and truly being able to let go, and finding more peace. But I would like to hear what you do, and then I'll share what I do.
So the healing process that I used to sort of heal myself from one of my really core wounds, which that wound is, the core belief is that the world is not a safe place. And there's a lot of reasons why I had this core wound, which we don't need to get into. The point is, it was there. And so, every one of us has a unique wounds, and recognizing what they are is just one of the steps in the healing process. It's really goes, the next steps that you take after you become aware is really where sort of the healing begins. But the first step is really just becoming aware of what the wound is. So some of the ways that I do that is, by noticing repetitive thoughts and emotions that come up in our lives, and then really looking at them and asking where they're coming from. So, what is the underlying belief that is there, that that causes my brain to continually replay these same thoughts, these same emotions, and so why is that happening? So when I started to look at the abandonment wound that left me believing that the world was not a safe place, I also I asked, what other beliefs did I come up with because because of this abandonment wound? So the belief that the world is not a safe place, the belief that I cannot trust others, the belief that I'm unlovable, and the belief that I'm not worthy. Like, those are 4 really core limiting beliefs that ruled my life. And so just recognizing the beliefs that underlie those, and then looking at the effect that they're having on your life. So I would look at, like, the belief that the world's not a safe place caused me to always be prepared. All right, I got to have the perfect plan. I need to think about every single possible thing that could go wrong and how I would handle it. I need to be 10 steps ahead of everyone else. I need to be hyper vigilant. And so all of these causes, these things became causes in my life that were creating effects that I didn't want, like, overworking, stress, burnout, avoiding situations, and taking on new things because I would be overwhelmed. So it starts with, like, awareness of the thoughts and feelings, the repetitive thoughts and feelings that are coming up, and digging deeper and asking, like, what are the core beliefs underlying those? How are they showing up in my life, and what are the effects of those causes, and then bringing that to spirit for healing. So, like, I would say, I have this belief that I can't trust others, and I want to be able to see this in a new light. And so, and that's sort of the way that I have been able to process it.
So what happens after you ask for help?
It depends. And so sometimes I get, I get a picture in my mind. Sometimes I get words delivered, not audible. It's never audible for me. Like, I don't ever hear anything. But sometimes it comes in the form of words, and it really depends on what I bring to spirit. But it's really different, of course, every time. And for me, when I when I pictured when I brought the first really big one to spirit, what I saw was this field of golden wheat and lavender, like rows of wheat and rows of lavender. And within the field were these like sporadic weeds that were there. And Spirit showed me that this is your mind, this beautiful, fertile field of lavender and wheat. And in your mind are just some weeds. And we're just going to pull this weed out that says, you can't trust others. We're just going to pull this weed out that says, and that's how it came to me one time, as an example. And the next day I did feel, and since then I have noticed that I don't carry that same level of intensity or energy around that belief. And I'm not saying it happened overnight. I did see it in a different light, and I saw that it was there for me. The weeds were there for me to unearth. I just had to be willing to unearth them, right? And I might need to go back in again, and maybe I didn't get all of the root, right?
Sure.
But like, it was just the way that it was like, this is the landscape of your mind, and there's just some weeds in there, and it was like no big deal. Like, that in of itself was so freeing. It's like, this is not that big of a deal. We can go in and we can unearth these weeds.
I love that you got visualization. I do
Yeah.
too. I think it's really fun. When you get like a dump of information from spirit in the form of a picture or a little story or a little movie in your mind. I
Yeah.
don't know, it feels magical.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. And it is amazing how just shining a light on those beliefs that are
Mm.
really not serving you, um, or may have served you in the past, but maybe are no longer playing the role that you wanted them to play, or whatever. When you shine that spotlight on them, sometimes that's all it takes. Is
Mm.
in my son who's 4 at his daycare, they use this little phrase, and it says they name it to tame it. They name the emotion to tame the emotion.
Mm.
And I think it's
Yeah.
the same thing with beliefs. When we name the belief,
Yeah.
sometimes that's all it takes to tame it and to
Mm.
pluck it right
Yeah.
out of the earth and be less affected by it. And like you said, you might have to go back in and do the, regular maintenance of seasonal weeding, but maybe it doesn't grow in as full every time. So
Mm.
that's really great. And so then um, does that require you to then like spend time nurturing a new belief do you have to like plant a new belief in its place, or to deepen
Good
new
question.
neural pathways?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the work that I did through A Course in Miracles, which was, 365 days of planting new beliefs. And actually, the way the course is designed is the first part of the course, probably the first 7 months or so, you are sort of dismantling fear-based thinking and seeing all the ways your mind thinks through the lens of fear. And so it shows you that. And then the last half of the course is really more affirmative, like planting new beliefs, like the world is a safe place. Like and that's actually one of I am safe anywhere in the world is one of the affirmations that you bring into meditation. And so like 365 of those, it's a very, very powerful experience. It's one of the most powerful spiritual trainings, or it's really self-training that I've been through, although I've done a lot of studying. That one's been very powerful. So I think, yes, learning, I think it's also about remembering the core spiritual principles, which is that we are all love, that we are all that the world is truly a safe place, that when we see others through the lens of love, we see the truth of who they are, we see the truth of ourselves. And that's really it's like it's not that we don't know these things, it's that we've forgotten, and we have to remember them, and that's it.
Yeah, it's so true. One of the things that I utilize, I mean, and it's a basic concept, but just compassion, right? Compassion for other people. And
Yeah.
then there's a belief that I adopted a very long time ago that I think has really served me for quick forgiveness in situations where I'm not like super severely triggered. And maybe it's more
Yeah.
around judgment than it is
Yeah.
around forgiveness. But
Right.
believing that if I was that person in their shoes, living
Mm.
their life with all the experiences they've had up to that point, with their
Yes.
DNA, with their mutations on that DNA, with their epigenetics, with all of their conditioning, that I would have made the same choice that they did.
Mm.
It's
Yep.
not so personal. It's everybody is on a path, and my soul didn't choose the same path. Maybe my soul chose a body that has a stronger moral compass or something, but believing that everybody truly is doing the best they can with the resources they were given.
Yeah.
And that I probably, if I were them, I would be them and I would have just made the same choice. So
Absolutely.
it's a heavy one, and it might take some time for some people to wrap their minds around that, but it's been helpful for me. But I also I want to piggyback onto you, because my process of forgiveness is very, very similar, actually.
Mm.
The beginning part, and then I've gotten stuck after that.
Mm.
Like, I can get to a place of I kind of see it in a new way, or I know things logically, but I'm having trouble feeling it.
Mm.
Like, I know logically they didn't do anything wrong, or logically I don't hold them responsible necessarily, but somehow, for some reason, I'm still being affected.
Mm.
um, I'm still, like, emotion is still coming up surrounding that experience that was difficult. And I'm in this case, I'm talking more about past related things,
Right.
things that happened in the past that I'm still operating out of. And so I have this belief, or I play with this belief at least, that what we experience is a projection of our internal experience. So
Yeah.
what happens in the external world reflects our internal states. And our ability to forgive another person, it can only be equivalent to the amount to which we have forgiven ourselves. And I'm not trying to be victim blamey in this at all.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't sound like that. But in a search for peace, um, oftentimes I think our brain, our subconscious, gets confused when we're blaming another. Oftentimes it can feel to our subconscious, because we are all one, uh, the unconscious parts of ourselves are essentially projecting our own self-blame outward. And we just don't see it. We project our own self-blame as blaming others. And that self-blame, it sometimes takes a moment to figure out what we could possibly be blaming ourselves for regarding a situation. If violence was done to us, perhaps we are subconsciously blaming ourselves for not defending ourselves, not fighting back, not speaking up, not protecting ourselves. Perhaps there are situations where I've had to do self-forgiveness around not asking for my needs to be met as a child, very, very, very young, like 2 or 3, and wanting attention. And
Yeah.
to forgive myself for not being brave enough to say, I want your attention. Um, for, and I can hold somebody else responsible for that. And I have subconsciously, but I feel a huge release when I forgive myself for the thing I'm blaming somebody else for. And sometimes it's as simple as, recently had a moment of big release and forgiveness, because I realized the ways that I was pointing the finger the other way, like I had also done a lot of those same things.
Yeah.
In my mind, I had justified my choices to behave in those ways, and I was judging somebody else for behaving in those ways. And once I shone the light back on myself and realized, oh, I have done a lot of those same things.
Yep.
And if I, when I forgave myself, I want them to forgive me for making
Mm.
those mistakes. So the least I could do is forgive them for making those same mistakes. We're all trying our best. And it really, like, it lifted it immediately, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
I think forgiveness can be an act for yourself. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to absolve somebody else of
Right.
their wrongdoing. You can be free of a situation, um, and it almost doesn't have to have anything to do with the other person and what they've done. It can completely be healed by you forgiving yourself, which is it seems counterintuitive, but I believe that that can be true. And I've
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you said, I mean, is the reason why, our ability to forgive ourselves, is directly correlated to our ability to forgive others, is because there's only one of us really here. We are all connected. Like you know, we're rays off the same sun, and there's no, space where one ray starts and another ray ends. So that's why healing ourselves is the way that we heal the world. And so not only just healing ourselves allows us to see others through the lens of love, which is through forgiveness, but it also allows us to see humanity through the lens of love, through so that is the bigger picture, and that's why it's so important that we all start to go inward and take a journey to the deepest part of ourselves, which is our spirit, to understand the truth of who we are, our real identity, and start to live from our real identity rather than the one we made up, which is our human experience. And then once we're able to practice living from that place, then we can bring them together, which we talked about earlier, where our human experience becomes becomes a loving kindness meditation all the time, where we're always, as much as we can, being loving and being kind and bringing that. And so if just imagine for a second, if everyone approached their lives this way, the world that we would live in, how different it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, really. And that's why, nobody can do it for you. And everyone has to do it for themselves. And so it's not, I think that there's a level of urgency and responsibility for us all to find this space within, and to start taking those steps.
Yeah. When we are in a state of judgment, for ourselves, if we're blocked and we can't forgive ourselves, we are at the same time blocking love.
Yeah.
And the more we can forgive ourselves and open up room for more love to enter, the better off we all will be. And so the act of selfishness for
Right.
prioritizing your peace, for setting boundaries, because forgiveness doesn't mean then you re-engage with people who have hurt you in the past
Absolutely
necessarily.
not.
Oftentimes it means you create a boundary that your subconscious wishes you had created sooner. And maybe you need to forgive yourself for not creating that boundary sooner. But once we can get to a place of being unburdened by so many of our experiences, and be in a state of less judgment for ourselves, it could seem like a selfish act, but it really contributes to the whole, and allows just more love to exist amongst all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the, sort of more esoterical explanation of why forgiveness is important, because there is the micro and then there is the macro. And that's why it's true. What one person does really impact all of us, because we are all connected. And once we start to see that, once we, I think that's part of what we talked about during our awakening conversation before, which is you zoom out and you see the bigger picture. You see how we're all connected. You see, what that means. And And so once you see that, you're not able to ever like go back to thinking the same way, right? Or living your life in the same way. And it doesn't mean you don't fall back into fear-based thinking, because certainly I do. It just means that I remember why it's important to shift out of it, and I won't let myself stay there. And it doesn't mean we don't experience pain. And, we're still, I think Eckhart Tolle says we are the sky, our emotions are the clouds, right?
Mm.
And our thoughts are the clouds, and so they're going to come, right? And that's part of this life. And right, being just remembering that helps us just again have a much more peaceful and joyful existence.
Yeah. Sounds like a good goal to me.
Right, like, who doesn't want this?
All
I see no
right.
hand. I see no hands raised. Okay.
Yeah. Let's not continue to deal with the same old stuff and put ourselves into the grave, having not worked through all of this, but
I know.
to each their own.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, Great. This was a really lovely conversation. Thank you so much for participating in it with me and being
Yes.
here, giving us your thoughts and your time.
It's always so good to talk to you, and you just create such a loving space, and I really just appreciate our talks. So anytime you want me to come back, I'm ready.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll do it again soon.
Okay.
And thank you. I appreciate those compliments. And um, yeah, I can't wait to have you back. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll see you
Thanks,
soon.
Kristen. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.